so it's going to be hard to get through service without having that great music. The good news is, for the four of us that are up here, we can preach to the choir a whole lot easier. In the past couple of years, as we've had this journey, and I've been helping to assist us getting through this time without a pastor, I've shared with you some of the things that are involved in getting to where we are on this journey ourselves. One of the tricks is to figure out what we're going to talk about. And I don't know how regular ministers do this on a weekly basis, because with a 4-week cycle, it's difficult enough to come up with a new, fresh topic each time. So the process I've gotten into is kind of sit back and listen for some phrase or word from outside myself to wake me up and make me think of it. And about 4 weeks ago, the song that Marcus and I sang when he was 4 years old, which is 21 years ago now, was "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." And that popped into my head. It kind of stuck there. So I went into the book of Joshua to look that up, and it's a very shallow thing, not a lot of subject matter there to play with. But as long as I was in the book of Joshua, the first thing I had to do was think about what you all have thought about. Joshua fit the Battle of Jericho. So I had to look that up. And I got Mahalia Jackson's version of it. If you haven't done that, I encourage you, go to the internet and find Mahalia Jackson singing "Joshua fit the Battle of Jericho." It's wonderful. In that process, I continue to look through the book of Jericho, the book of Joshua, and talk myself out of that subject, which is interesting in and of itself. But of interest also is that one of my three amigos, Cliff, often starts a prayer with saying, "God, you got me up this morning, and there must be a good reason for it." And I thought about that morning that Moses got up after 40 years of wandering around the desert and said good morning to God, and God said, "Hey, Moses, your job is done." And that same morning, Joshua got up, and God said, "You've been a good servant, but guess what? Your job is about to get more difficult." It's kind of interesting as we think on those kind of things. What's that got to do with today's topic? Not a blooming thing. I just thought it was interesting. I share it. Our New Testament reading this morning is from the book of Matthew, chapter 25, verses 31 through 40. This passage can be found on page 1613 of your pew Bibles. Jesus has been sharing a whole series of parables in the process of teaching his disciples. This particular parable is titled "The Sheep and the Goats." Listen for Jesus' lesson and God's word for you. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep and the goats. He will put the sheep on his right, and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty, or give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick, or in prison, or go to visit you?" And the king will reply, "I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Let us pray. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Jehovah, my rock and my redeemer. This passage from Matthew is a truly rich one. It is one of Jesus' more well-known parables. In verse 31 through 40, Jesus is praising his disciples with the positive. When he was hungry, they fed him. When he was thirsty, they gave him a drink. When he was a stranger, they brought him in. They gave him clothing when he needed it, cared for him while he was sick, and visited him in prison. In the following verses of this parable, which are not included in this morning's lesson, he turns the entire story around and tells us about not receiving assistance for the same circumstances. I find it interesting that Jesus refers to himself as a king in these passages, a role he downplays elsewhere in his journeys. In any event, the key phrase in this entire passage is found in verse 40, when Jesus tells his disciples, "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." The primary teaching point of this parable is in that one simple phrase. As with so many passages of the Bible, I find myself attracted to a single phrase, in this case, the least. Who exactly were these beings Jesus referred to as the least? The least of these refers to those in a variety of situations, and they certainly include the hungry, thirsty, impoverished, sick, and in prison. These are the ones at his right, the sheep, his disciples. I have come to believe that this group includes all of us who are his followers. He is telling me that if I help these brothers and sisters, it would be exactly the same as helping him. You see, Jesus connects service to the needy with the eternal reward of heaven. If we do good deeds, including extending charity to fellow believers in difficult situations, we gain favor. I think it goes without saying that ignoring our fellow man will result in the exact opposite reaction. As he said in verse 46 of the same chapter, then they will go away to eternal punishment. Throughout the Bible, we see multiple examples of God showing special concern for the poor and needy. In Psalm 35, David says words to the effect of, "You put the down and out on their feet and protect the unprotected from bullies." It doesn't surprise me that he expects his followers to do the same, especially toward those of the family of God. Paul put it succinctly in Galatians 6 when he wrote, and I paraphrase, "So let's not allow ourselves to get fatigued doing good. At the right time we will harvest a good crop if we don't give up or quit. Right now, therefore, every time we get a chance, let us work for the benefit of all, starting with the people closest to us in the community of faith." Now I want to come back to the word least. In the Greek, the word used is elakistos, which means least or smallest, but in the weaker sense it means very little or very small. It's 2019. Who are the least among us today? Our children are far from being the least, even though they are small people. Are the least among us those who do menial tasks? Are they perhaps the people who aren't in the workplace? Those unemployed or unemployable? Are we talking about people who aren't quite as good as us? Are the homeless out in the woods the least? Are the people who come to our food cupboard or Martha's meal the least? If the poor, the homeless, the diseased, disgraced, incarcerated are the least among us, what are we doing to fulfill Christ's order to us? We all know our deacons do a marvelous job of reaching out to the people we are talking about here. They have the food cupboard, the thrift shop, cooperating links to the social service programs that are available. We have a direct connection to Hartford Family House right across the street. We recognize and assist needy people through the church office. But, don't you hate the word but when it comes to something like this? Here comes a $64,000 question, and you probably already knew it was coming. Is that enough? Most Christians agree that caring for the poor and marginalized is a central tenet of the gospel. And what better passage than in today's lesson when Jesus commands us to care for the least of these? Now, I think we can all agree that Jesus was talking about the poor and the marginalized. But are they all that Jesus was talking about? That question may seem trivial to you, but the importance of it can hardly be overstated. After all, doesn't Jesus tie our eternal destiny to how we treat the least of these brothers and sisters? In a little broader context, the sheep and goats represent salvation criteria. Who is in, who is out? Jesus paints a fairly stark picture in that it's either salvation or damnation. So back to the question which I posed earlier, is that enough? How are we to know? Have we dispensed with our responsibilities to obey this commandment? I mean, after all, I'm a member of Grove Presbyterian, and our deacons do amazing work. I have a problem with that thought, though. I guess that approach works if you're talking about belonging to a blood bank. If somebody in the group donates, we all benefit. But when it comes to fulfilling our responsibilities to serve the least, it can't work that way. We each need to do our best to follow the rules as we understand them. Let me ask it this way. When a person approaches you and asks for your spare change, what do? My tendency has often been to say, well, I kind of need what I got. Or some mumbled phrase similar to that. Never said it, but the thought is, unemployment is down. Why don't you go out and get a job? But how much spare change do we normally have in our pockets? I'd guess it's probably less than $1. Why not just hand it over a little and hope and pray that it goes toward food, not booze or cigarettes? This then brings us to the subject of judgment. How are we supposed to know who is the least? Unless we do a little profiling. There's a word that's been politically incorrect. A little profiling. We can use outward appearance, like the type and condition of clothing the person is wearing. We can also use another criterion, like if the person appears to be really run down, or sickly, stumbly, and so on. There's an often misquoted verse from Matthew 7. We all say, "Judge not, lest ye be judged." Interestingly, the correct King James wording is, "Judge not, that ye be not judged." That's Cliff's original native tongue. Did you get that? Okay, good. This statement is in red letters in my Bible. So they are the words spoken by Jesus. But he was not telling us that we have no responsibility or right to judge others. What he said was that if we set out to judge another, we need to be super careful, because we can then be judged by the same standard. But to add to the confusion here, let's not forget that in Matthew 18, Jesus tells us that we are to correct a brother or sister who is sinning. The point of all this is that if we set out to judge another person before giving assistance to someone in need, we are not doing anyone, most especially ourselves, any favors. The church at the bottom of the hill on Route 155, just after we pass under the railroad bridge, is Gospel Tabernacle. My other amigo Carol reminded me that their signboard had the message, "Love everybody, I'll sort them out." Love everybody, I'll sort them out. What a great thought. We're told in 2 Corinthians 13 that the greatest is the love. So why not? Back to the question just one more time. Are we doing enough? As a church, I would say that we're doing a lot, and that any more would very likely put us into a bad position, because it would simply wear out the good people who are doing all the work. As for myself personally, I know that I should be doing more, and I promise you that I will try. Now, I'm not going downtown Baltimore seeking out any lesser folk, but I will stop and try to reach out to those with whom I come into contact. How about you? That is a question to which I would just as soon not hear the answer. You must resolve that in your own heart. Amen. Our next hymn is number 350, the summons. Will you come and follow me if I but call your name?